Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so it says that it's redirecting to the Facebook Live. I'm just gonna check and see if it's there. Yes, it says happening now. All right, alhamdulillah, we are good to go. I see most of the people are here. I'm waiting. Oh, there he is. Alhamdulillah, all the way from Kuwait. Alhamdulillah, Nasir's checking in. All right, I think I have all of our participants here, our panelists. Sister Islah,
Alhamdulillah.
Dr. Malik.
Wa alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Dr. Will.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Brother Jose.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Brother Nasir.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah, thank you all for being here with us. Let me start my video. Inshallah, start my video. Alhamdulillah, we are here gathered today to talk about, to gather the Muslim educators that I know who have been working not just with Muslim youth, but the broader in the public, in institutions around the world on this area of anti-racism for a very long time. We know as Black and Brown Muslims that this is an issue that we have always had to deal with and address. And so I think it is pertinent that we come together during these times of crisis and to help to hold together our community and direct some of the emotions and give it the proper context, inshallah. So that's what we're here to do. And I know all of you are ready to talk about this and ready to help the community and help us to put in perspective what we are seeing, which really has been a long history of oppression and fighting and struggling since really the beginning of Islam. So this is nothing new to the Muslims. This is nothing new to us as Black and Brown people, but we want to be able to gather together and really bring some perspective to the Muslim community, to non-Black and Brown Muslim educators, to non-Black and Brown Muslim leaders in our community on how we can really come together and focus on supporting Muslim youth and other youth that we deal with in our lives as educators. And before we get started on giving a little bit background on each one of you, we have another co-facilitator here. Alhamdulillah, brother Sajid, Ustadh Sajid is here with us. Assalamu alaikum. And so he's going to be helping me facilitate some of the questions, inshallah. And I will briefly go into his background as well, inshallah. So I'll start with Sister Islaah. Dr. Kimberly, I didn't call you out. Dr. Kimberly is here. I just saw you, alhamdulillah.
No worries. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So we have all of the panelists here, alhamdulillah. So I will start with Sister Islaah, and then she can pass it to Dr. Kimberly, inshallah. Just very quickly give us a few information about your background and your bio.
Okay, so I don't really memorize those facts, but I've been in education for quite a while. I've been, I think, since the 70s, so I'm dating myself. And I have taught every grade level from pre-K on up to graduate school. I served as adjunct faculty for 6 years at Johns Hopkins Graduate School of Education. And there, my specialty was human development and learning diversity and culturally responsive teaching, alhamdulillah. And I have helped establish several Islamic schools and have been principal in public, charter, and Islamic schools. The focus is on how we have Islam inform our our use of education as a tool for empowerment, as a tool for liberation of not just Blacks, not just Muslims, but of all people. But my immediate focus is for Muslims, particularly Black Muslims.
Alhamdulillah, thank you. And Dr. Kimberly?
So, assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Kim Harper, and I am an assistant professor at North Carolina A&T State University, which is the nation's largest historically Black college. Although we argue with FAMU, I'm going to claim it for A&T. I am a grad of A&T HBCU. I come to this conversation from three perspectives. I'm a convert to Islam, 20 years. I am a mother. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old in the school system, and I've been teaching at the post-secondary level for 16 years. And then my area of research is reproductive justice. So the right to have children, the right not to have children or have access to healthcare, reproductive healthcare, and then the right to raise those children in safe and healthy environments. So point 3, safe and healthy environments is where my conversation is centered today.
Shukran. We're going to go over to Dr. Malik.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Malik. Let's see. Sister says she's at North Carolina A&T. I'm kind of jealous. I'm at Wilberforce University. I just completed my first year of Wilberforce. Prior to that, I spent 7 years at Fresno State. Let's see. I earned my master's in community counseling from the great Chicago State University, and I earned my doctorate in counselor education and supervision from Northern Illinois University. And I mostly teach graduate school students as far as clinical mental health counseling and clinical rehabilitation counseling. And my main focus of research is racial microaggressions, racial identity development, and stereotype threat among people of African descent and people who identify as Black Muslims.
Next, we're going to go to Brother Jose.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
So I took my Shahada over 20 years ago, alhamdulillah, at the University of Michigan. I got my dual bachelor's in history and sociology and my master's in curriculum and instruction. I've been working in Muslim and public school systems, since that time, over 20 years, alhamdulillah. As a principal teacher, I've been youth director. I've started all kind of different programs in schools, mainly in the DC metro area, DC, Baltimore. That's after I'm originally from Chicago. Went to DC area, Baltimore area for about 20 years now. I'm back home in Chicago. Currently working, previous to my current position, I was working in Dr. Jackson's Al-Amin program, American Learning Institute for Muslims. I was the operation executive for a few years, and now I'm currently a dean on the South Side at a brand new school, charter school that Common started called Art in Motion. So I'm the dean there, trying to utilize restorative practices when it comes to dealing with challenging behaviors as opposed to being punitive. That's my passion at the moment as well. So I hope I can contribute on the brown side of the discussion, inshallah, and approach and how we can appreciate this moment together, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Brother Nasir.
Assalamu alaikum. So first, let me say this. My connection where I'm at is not the greatest. So please, somebody throw up a wave if I freeze or if you cannot hear me, because you guys are all frozen to me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I'm going to throw up a thumbs up. You see that?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Can
We hear you.
all hear me?
I'll send him a text through chat and see if that helps.
Okay.
You can hear me? Okay. Apologies. So I'm
Is he still with us? Okay.
No, I think his connection is
Yeah,
thing.
it's
So
pretty late over there right now. So we'll move on to Dr. Will. And then we'll round back to Brother Nasir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I am an instructional technologist for a K through 12 school district where I have overseen the deployment of a one-to-one Chromebook initiative at a couple of schools. And now, once that is out, I primarily am working with teachers on how to use technology to reimagine the technology to reimagine the learning experiences of their students. And as you can imagine, these past couple of months when people kind of went online for the first time, it's been really crazy, and me working with teachers. And I'm also an evangelist for financial literacy education and entrepreneurship education in K through 12.
So very quickly, I'll just shout out Brother Nasir as he gets his sound working. Brother Nasir is a counselor educator, international counselor educator, currently right now based in Kuwait. And I know from working with him that he has worked with several schools, working with him overseas, that he has set up several counseling programs internationally for Muslim schools in the state of Kuwait. And inshallah, hopefully he will be able to expound a little bit more on that. So we're gonna go ahead and get started right with the questions. And I apologize for not sending them out last night. You know, it's challenging. We're all, you know, doing double duty around here. So I'll start with number one, and I'm gonna try to bounce it off to all of you. If you wanna say something, please put your thumbs up. But I'll just keep going down the list. But question number one, just to start us off, what are some of the racial challenges that Muslim youth and parents face inside the masajids and the public schools or colleges? What are some of those challenges, those racial challenges that Muslim youth and parents are facing inside the masajids and schools, colleges, universities? Going right back to the beginning, I will start with Sister Islaah.
okay, so the racial challenges of some of our youth. I'd like to focus more so on in schools as opposed to within the masajid. That's very general. So, you know, in terms of within schools, it's the challenge. These are the challenges that many students face, which is that they don't see themselves in the curriculum. They don't have exemplars in terms of the people who are standing in front of them as role models. Their exemplars don't always look like them, don't have the same culture. And even if they look like them, they don't have the same cultural background, the same experiences. So my most recent classroom experience, I purposely went back into the classroom, and I was teaching high schoolers. And I know that a lot of them are frustrated. And I had a number, and it was a public school, and I had a number of Muslim students there. And a lot of them are trying to blend in. Assimilate isn't even a word. Blend into the background. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be identified as Muslims. So if you are in an environment where your identity is not affirmed, where the people around you don't really understand your experience, then a lot of times that creates a crisis of identity. And so it was important for me, again, having experienced this in the past, to be a presence there. So they do need to have support in terms of some of them need translators, some of them need to have people who are willing to serve as almost like cultural liaisons between them and their culture and the school environment. So, I mean, their problems in general are the problems of all people who are in a situation, an institution that does not really reflect their needs in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brother Jose, would you like to chime in on that from the K-12 standpoint?
Sure. So, Bismillah. So I think for my experience in Islamic schools in particular, I would say that the similar issues that we see when it comes to over suspension, over punitive type of responses to behaviors, feeling that especially black students just straight up in the Muslim schools being overly targeted, or teachers and administrators feeling threatened, or as though like the means of communication is more disrespectful, therefore consequences become larger. I think the same way we see that in the public school system, unfortunately we see that also in our Muslim schools. So that's one piece on more of the administrative kind of level. That's a particular challenge that we really have to rectify. I think secondly, just the colonial baggage that many of our brothers and sisters that come from overseas, they bring with them, in the sense of let's be real, like don't be friends with this particular person, don't get too close, kind of a thing, and seeing the self-segregation happening in the lunchrooms, kids bullying in a indirect bullying, not necessarily physically per se, though sometimes it happens, but more just exclusion and isolation, so that then the student themselves are not in an environment that's conducive to learning, so that now they're struggling with fitting in to where they're supposed to fit in. Most of the time the Muslims are sending their children to a Muslim school so that they don't have to deal with some of this stuff on the outside, but then now they're coming into a place that's supposed to be a safe space, and they're being challenged and confronted with this, and it becomes probably even more damaging to the child, because at least if you're going with non-Muslims, you can justify it and just say, okay, well, they don't like me because I'm Muslim. I get that. But to get that from your brothers and sisters religiously, when in class they're saying there's no race, and the Prophet said this, and the Sahaba did that, it becomes even harder for them to understand and to process. So that's a big piece. And one of the unique things, again, not to take too much time, but one of the unique things that I found myself being placed in, because I kind of look like them, but I understand being a convert, Latino minority, and having good relationships with the Black American community, being kind of in the middle, like them saying, why the black brothers and sisters always talking about race? This is especially pre 9/11. Why the Black Muslims always talking about race and always looking angry and this and that, and then on the other side saying, why don't the immigrants? And I'm in the middle, like trying to juggle and communicate and educate, why and how, and the importance of history. And this will probably come up later in the conversation, but just really the importance of history and knowledge of self, knowledge of struggles and different things like that across the board is really key to this. But yeah, I mean, I would say that that's the biggest thing is just this, the view of the Black person being a threat, and that being ingrained in the minds of people, and then the reaction to our students, Muslim students who are Black, that's happening everywhere, whether it's in public school, on the street, or it's in a Muslim school. So that's what I have to say.
Dr. Malik, would you like to chime in there, please?
Assalamu alaikum, thank you. Now I gotta follow after Jose. That's gonna wow. Woo, the Jose and the sister laid it down. I don't know what I could do. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to leave a little early, so I'm gonna
Yes, that's why I wanted to call you.
I'm gonna try to get this as quick as possible. A lot of things that Jose and the sister said were very true. A lot of times what happened is people of African descent in this hemisphere, in this society, always have to wear a double mask. Unfortunately, being that they come into Muslim spaces, where it's a school or the masjid, they still have to wear that double mask, right? And the thing is like Black consciousness is on a spectrum. And since it's on a spectrum, what happens is that, like Jose was saying, they're being taught that there's no race in Islam, there's no racism in Islam, but they see these microaggressions every day, right? So they get this incongruent behavior, and they at times feel like, are they themselves imagining this? Because a lot of times when they go to someone, they get gaslighted, right? Oh, you're being too sensitive. Oh, could it be this? And so it's like that strays on their mental health, because they know what they see. They know their spider senses is kicking off, but the thing is that they're getting told that it's your imagination, or another explanation could be. So it's like the thing is that I'm concerned about, like Jose was saying, is whether it's public schools or Muslim schools, the school to prison pipeline is still there because of a lot of implicit biases that our administrators have, our instructors have, and even on college and universities. Muslims in general are looked at as a threat, right, on college and universities. The benefit, I think, a lot of Muslims who are, I don't know what term I could use, immigrants, is that they are the face of Islam. So they always getting put up, and when there's a talk, they already get put up. So it's like a lot of people are used to them being Islam. But unfortunately, brothers and sisters of African descent, whenever they rarely ever see anyone they can identify with as a scholar or even an educator they could go to and say these things are happening. And I keep thinking about the movie Muslim, right? And I don't know if everyone saw that movie, but in the movie Muslim, he had went through so many traumatic experiences and he had no one to talk to. And he finally found the faculty advisor who looked like him. So he kept kind of coming around him because he wanted to see if he was safe, right? So it's like a lot of times that's happened with our students in these schools. Cut it off there.
Alhamdulillah. Dr. Kimberly?
Yeah, so I know in the college level, to me, a lot of the drama and fitna that we see in your masjid ends up being replicated in the student MSA. And so you have your international students who come in. You have your students who are interested in Islam. So they start, hanging out, and it just seems like a breeding ground for confusion because people want to debate Islam and their experiences rather than just kind of work for the common good of promoting Islam to the campus community, participating in community events where they can show a positive, face of Islam. Because a lot of times, and for me, I know Black people, this is my opinion though, but Black folks have a history with Islam in America. So a lot of people have someone in their family who's Muslim, had a friend who's Muslim. So I don't think all Black Americans, not all Black Americans, but a lot of Black people are comfortable with Muslims much more than the outside community. But when they get on the HBCU campus, these tensions arise. So you have tensions between people from the continent of Africa with Black Americans, and then people who are international, so your Arabs and your Pakistan, students from Pakistan, all coming together, kind of vying for the face of Islam, and it's problematic. So to me, I see a lot of what happens in the masjid happen on the college campus. So then you don't end up with an MSA. For instance, our MSA is defunct, but then we have pockets of student organizations based on their country. So the Saudis have their own organization, the students from Palestine have their own organization, but we can't come together under the umbrella of the MSA. Now that's not true for every college campus, but that's what we've seen at A&T over the last 6 years. It's been very difficult to pull them all together and say, this is Islam, let's work together.
I'm going to start on a new question. What are some of examples of anti-Blackness and anti-Muslim policy in the U.S. education system that Muslim educators have had, and Muslim youth, parents as well, have had to contend with? And I'm going to throw that to Dr. Will.
Well, I don't, in our school district, it's different because we have a school district where.
Well, you're in the South too, so just put that out there.
Well, I'm in the South, but when I hear what you're saying, it's not reflective of the experience that we have, simply because in my school district, all top leadership at the district level, Black folk. The majority of school leadership at the school level, Black folk. So I don't see a lot of those issues around the school because it's not run by outsiders, it's run by ourselves. And the majority of students who are Muslim in the district are Black as well. So it's just been a different experience for me to see what's going on, because I don't see that. We do have students who are there who come from Middle Eastern backgrounds, and they have not told me anything that they've experienced anything. When I see them on campus, they seem to be embraced by everyone. So it's been, I don't want to say it's, Shangri-La, but I haven't seen anything that make me go, okay, we have an issue here. Everything seems to be cool. I think, I've had my own experience with a faculty member, but in terms of the children and feeling anything, I haven't seen anything at all.
Dr. Malik, thank you.
I envy Dr. Will. I wish I was in the South with him because it sounds like it's nice. I'm going to start off with two experiences, basically, from Fresno State and now at Wilberforce. Fresno State was a state college to California. One of the things I know is a lot of the brothers and sisters that were in the MSA were international. And so it's like, not since it happened after 9/11, there's always been an alert. And so one of the things is that what I noticed, especially at Fresno State, was they wasn't proactive on learning about some of the things that Muslims celebrate, right? So they had to be really educated. So I had to really advocate for some things. So they wasn't really aware of, like, when was Ramadan, what special needs the Muslim students were going to have, prayer rooms. Where can the brothers and the sisters go to pray? Luckily, that was a lot of acceptance and willing to adjust at Fresno State, but you still had those things to where it's like as the faculty advisor, you have to advocate for the students, right? At Wilberforce, since it's founded in the AME church, there's like a bias, right? There's like an automatic bias toward Christianity. So one of the things I've noticed is that, unfortunately, I don't have the same experience as Brother Will. It seemed like, our people, the deeper they are rooted in Christianity and they're immersed in Christianity, the more prejudiced they can be, especially against Muslims, right? So it's like, there's like a few Muslim students at Wilberforce, but what I say is they like to try to be the invisible people, where they just acknowledge me, but they don't want anyone else to know because they have a fear of retribution, because everything is geared around the AME church. And so, like, your first year at Wilberforce, you have to go to the church services, right? No exception, have to go, right? So it's like, so the thing is, like, they looking for advocacy, from me as a faculty member to kind of try to push things. So it's like, I think that in those two circumstances where I know there's a difference as far as some things falling on deaf ears at Wilberforce versus the willingness to be, open and inclusive from Fresno State.
Mm-hmm. And in that case, where they're required, are they required to go to the church services? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So how does that play out for the Muslim students?
They usually just end up going. And just kind of being there, not fully participating. It's like, let me see. It's like that the attitude is at Wilberforce is almost like everyone is exactly like us, because they're founded in the AME church, so everyone is exactly like us, but they don't really have an openness to inclusion per se. I hope that.
And if you can't hear someone, please let me know. Just, you can type that into the chat box. Thank you. I'm gonna go on and try to get through these questions. And I see Brother Nasir. is back with us. I want you to go ahead and really quickly give your bio, and then I'll throw you a question, inshallah.
Yeah, I'll be very quick because, again, I apologize. The connection here is horrendous. So, Nasir, Al-Amin, bio, educated VCU undergrad psychology, graduate work in social work at Columbia, but more importantly than any of that, raised by a Black woman. Father was Native American, who had Tony Montana dreams. And I think those who are listening will understand that reference. And they divorced by age 11. So
it is what it is.
So the things that I learned through education were just reinforcing some of the things, the seeds that already been planted growing up. So the education prior to the walls of academia really gave me the foundation, and is what gave me the clarity of thought. And this time actually.
All right, so I have a question for you. I know you are in Kuwait, and you do deal with a lot of counselor education. Can you basically give me a background about what are the challenges for Black Muslim educators and Black Muslim youth in the private and public sector internationally? What are some of the challenges with working with Black Muslim youth internationally?
So let me say this. So I'm speaking on behalf of my company, Align and Defy, that we work with helping people understand their emotions and getting past spaces in life where they're stuck. And so my work actually is, yes, I'm based in Kuwait, but I work virtually both in the States, but also in the UK and Canada. So I'll speak from that lens. I think it's very important. So with adults as well as the youth, one of the things, I apologize if you guys have already mentioned this. I think one of the most critical things to do with the youth is, with good intentions, don't give them the same lies we were given. Again, there's good intention, but don't give them the same lies about the condition we're in that we were given. So I'll be very quick. I am of the perspective that what we're seeing now is a byproduct of colonialism. That's an understanding that I came into my 30s. The conditions we're seeing right now was happening when I was a young man. Before I was born, my mother saw it, my grandparents saw it, my father, who's Native American, saw it. So don't give them the lie with good intention. Have a proper analysis when we talk to our children. And we will talk to them because we all know we give them the talk. And when we give them the talk, we're giving them a hint of an honest reality. So starting at a young age, my daughter is 4 and she can tell you what imperialism is and she can tell you what colonialism is. And for her understanding. So don't lie to them. With good intentions, they can handle it. Give them the truth. Right now, what we're seeing is state violence. State violence in the States, you'll see it in Palestine. You'll see it throughout the continent. It's the same thing Malcolm talked about. It's the same thing that Patrice Lumumba talked about. So it's important that we give them a proper understanding, to be very specific, a proper political analysis. I'm a convert to Islam. What attracted me to Islam was Malcolm. And it wasn't that Malcolm was saying he was Muslim that attracted me. It was that Malcolm had a political understanding that I could relate to. He spoke to my level, but also could speak at a level at Oxford University or going to the jails and speak. So that political understanding is what I would say we have to give the youth, and hopefully give it to the adults. If the adults get it, they get it. But if not, give it to the youth. Give them a sound political understanding that this is a byproduct of colonialism. Forget about and again, I apologize if you guys have spoken about this, or if it goes against what anyone else has said. There's room for multiple perspectives. I'm not interested in racism at all. I care less about what's in the mind of someone else. Be racist. What I want is Black power. What I'm teaching my daughter is Black power. Black power counteracts white power, European power, colonial power. So I'll stop with that. But that's what I would say with the youth. Give them a proper analysis of the situation. What Garvey was talking about led to what Malcolm was talking about. Malcolm learned from his father, who met his wife, who met at a Garvey meeting, political education at an early age, and then keep it consistent as they grow. So that's what I would say, political education. Forget about this racism thing. This is a colonial issue. We are colonial subjects being treated that way. You find our condition everywhere you find Africans throughout the diaspora. And I'm not sure if I was supposed to talk that long,
That was
but
good.
I if I did.
You going straight in, so we good. We good.
Okay. Apologies to everyone else.
Alhamdulillah. Ustadh Sajid.
Okay, next question. I guess you can direct this to who you'd like. What are some of the long-term disadvantages that Muslim youth can suffer from being exposed to discrimination from the community and outside of their community?
If anybody would like to jump on that question, just go ahead.
Should I repeat it?
Brother Jose, did you want?
Yeah.
No.
Bismillah. So just quickly before jumping on the actual answer to the question, I think, we can get caught the whole discussion talking about and identifying problems, because I think we've done that for generations. I think we also need to be thinking about what next and the vision. And I think, when it comes to what are the effects, the mental health, the social emotional health of our youth is really imperiled. There's been trauma that's been passed on from generation to generation, and that trauma not being properly number one, validated. I think that's a huge piece that the country just overall has not been able to validate the trauma in and of itself, and then the byproduct effects, whether economically, politically, socially, educationally, health wise, all the way through. That's the first step. But as we were mentioning before, whether it's in Muslim schools or public schools, and the youth are constantly being viewed a certain way because of their skin tone, that in and of itself continues this cycle of low self-esteem and whatnot that manifests. But I think just overall, we need to be thinking about vision. Like, what is our purpose? Allah put us in this place, in this time, in this moment for a reason. He doesn't do this without reason, right? So what is our purpose then, being Muslims, being people of color in the United States at this particular moment? What is our vision then? Because yes, we need to educate, no doubt. And I'm a history major, I believe that 100%, right? But educate towards what end, right? And then once we understand what that end should kind of look like, we come to a consensus within our community first, before we can even think about the other grander Muslim community. What does that look like? Then you can say, okay, now as a youth, we need this in the community. We need journalists, we need social workers, we need educators, so that we can really build towards that. And I think, one of the things that we can learn from the nation is that they had a vision, and they tried to, enact that vision through various means, economic, political, and all these other ways. Even if forget the theological piece, right? They had the vision. And I think that's the piece that we're lacking at the moment is, where is it that we're trying to go, so that then we can impart that to the youth, educate them, and then push them into those different areas of need so that we can survive as a community. Because, there's no saying that our kids are going to stay Muslim. Allah forbid anything happens. But if we're not on it and the kids don't feel like empowered in a future for Islam in this place, then why would they stay on, on the ship, as the challenges continue to come? It's easier to just jump off the, off the ship. You know what I'm saying? So, I think we really need to be thinking, beyond a little bit as well, inshallah.
I'd like to.
Go ahead, Sister Islaah.
I'd like to jump in on that. I've been thinking in terms of solutions because a lot of us, if you survey all of us, we all have an analysis of what the problems are. And the problems may vary from context to context, but in terms of solutions, I just want to throw this out there and get us in that sort of thinking, because I do think that we need a paradigm shift when it comes to education, and that Muslims and Black people, marginalized people in general, have to think in terms of how they can grab the reins of education, influence it, establish. Because I go back and look at, like you say, history. History is important. What have we done in the past that worked? And during different traumatic times, we are in a time of intense trauma. You have to focus on not just what are they learning, but how are they healing? And we right now in the school system, I've had several schools contact me saying, well, what do we do now with COVID and being at home? And I said, you focus on healing, but most feel the pressure to keep up with test scores and whatnot. But if we have a generation of students who are able to, meet the bar when it comes to academic metrics, but are emotionally and spiritually and in other ways unhealthy, they become unhealthy adults, because the product of this that we see right now, the racism, is post-traumatic stress. And it's a real thing. And so until we as educators push to have that considered and reflected in how we teach and what we teach, because if we're not looking at approaches that are informed by research on trauma and our I like the whole idea about teaching truth that the brother talked about. If the students don't feel like they're connected, if it's not relevant to them, if it is not healing to them, then we're doing the same thing all over. And I invite us to look at models, like you mentioned, the nation, but really we're talking about alternatives to the regular public education route. And something that years ago, and I hate to be long, but something that I read years ago that I think is really important is Dr. Nathan and Julia Hare, back in the 80s. I still have the books, okay? They talked about needing to develop almost like surrogate parents, because we need that piece where our children have the support they need. So I'm thinking in terms of family and community, professional learning communities, so to speak, because everybody doesn't have the parents or the wherewithal to have somebody saying, did you get your homework done? Did you, showing up at the PTA? No matter what situation you're in, we need to develop our own schools, our own systems. More importantly, we need to push to develop more curricula that we write, that we produce, because if we create our own institutions, our own schools, but they are reflective of the same curriculum that we've been using, it's the same thing. We're not changing the trajectory. So that's what I wanted to throw out on the table.
I hear. May I speak?
Yes, sir.
My brother Nasir and sister, look, y'all brought it, and I love it because I was watching. If you see me on Twitter, what I'm always talking about is I don't care if white people like me or not. That does not consume my life. I don't look in the mirror and go, oh my gosh, white supremacy exists. How am I going to live? I don't care about that. What we need to do is live a life of self-determination and self-reliance. Now, people brought up the nation, but Wharf Dean, when he left, he did the same thing in terms of creating Black businesses and education, the same thing. I was watching this webinar the other night, and Sister Aisha Prime said, as Black people from a systemic level, we don't educate ourselves, we don't employ ourselves, we don't clothe ourselves, we don't feed ourselves. And that's, to me, where we need to focus on in terms of creating our own institutions where, again, we educate ourselves, we employ ourselves, we create these mechanisms to where we are not looking for outsiders to be our saviors, or looking for outsiders to provide things that we should be providing for ourselves. And so that's why when I talk about, you know, education and financial literacy and entrepreneurship, I'm talking about us creating, you know, buying Black, building Black, doing whatever thing for Black, not to the exclusion of anyone, but to make sure that we control the systems within our community so that we do not have to have, you know, say, please pick me, choose me, love me, that we, from an internal perspective, we got that code. So when you talk about our youth, how do we keep our youth engaged? You know, young, gifted, and Black, teach them, look, you are beautiful, you are intelligent, you are something special, and instill in them and show them and surround them with beautiful, the deliciousness of our diaspora, surround them with these people and let them have these experiences. And I think that's where we need to go in terms of solutions, is not to look for outsiders, but to look within ourselves.
So we're going to keep it moving with the next question.
Can I quickly just add on to that? If you don't
Yeah,
mind?
go ahead.
So one of the things I would just add on to that is, again, because we're talking micro and macro, I would also say that yeah, buying Black, banking Black, buying the block, and my understanding and what I'm articulating is it's a step, a needed step along the way to reparations. Like, let's be like, and the thing is this, that's the just thing. So we're Muslims and we're about justice and removing oppression. This colonial system has to pay for the injustice that is done to that. I am not teaching my children and those that I come in contact with, I am not teaching them to give up on that. So in a actual actionable to do, join organizations that are actually engaged right now with advocating and fighting for reparations. They are there. They may not be in the Muslim community, and that may be the connection we need to make in terms of us understanding that argument and then connecting with organizations that have done it for some time and push that agenda, because the studies are clear. Buying Black and Black capitalism, which we really would have to investigate because we don't want to be exploiting our own, right? That's the nuance in this that we don't want to do. But in order to be independent, we need that capital. We need that check back. We need that. So reparations, to me, has to be a part of the end goal of economics. Yes, buy the Black. Buy Black, yes. But with the intention that we're not letting America off the hook. We're not letting the empire off the hook. I'm raising my kids, and I think we should all raise our kids that the just thing to do is for them to write that check. And so I'll stop there because I don't want to take up too much time.
No, I think that's an excellent point, though, because in terms of, you know, creating curriculum, building schools, that takes capital that we just don't have in our communities. When you look at our Black and brown communities throughout the United States, you know, we are entrenched in poverty. You know, I mean, I'm teaching in one of the poorest school districts in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has a lot of wealth, one of the top educators in the United States. Yet, you know, we have children living below the poverty line. You know, majority of my students are migrant workers, their families. And so people need to pull back the layers and see that there's layers to teaching, and there's layers to building, and there's layers to networking. And a lot of it starts with the capital. We can't do it without the capital. But Ustadh Sajid, you have the next question?
Yes, actually, several of the panelists went into the social aspect of things and the PTSD, and they mentioned the SEL, which the next question actually contains information about that. So the next question is, there's a lot of curriculum available on social emotional learning and teaching tolerance, but few from an Islamic POV or point of view. If we were going to create such a resource, what would you add to it? Should I repeat or?
I want to jump in with that, answer that, because I think the resources are out there. Muslim authors are just on fire. They are everywhere. We have.
There you go, Dr. Kimberly. We writing.
So I think the resource is there. The support is not.
Mm.
On top of that, when you have authors who write books, they don't always include Muslim children of color. It's just there aren't any Black folks in the pictures. So unless the author is Black or brown, you probably not see a Black or brown child represented in that. So I think people are out there to work, but we're not supporting them at the level that we should. You know, we have people who are making movies, who are trying to get into animation. People are doing the work, but I don't think our community is supporting it. They're not supporting it. And that's a problem, because representation matters. If kids don't see them, and we know Muslim children are looking at television and on the internet, and if they don't see themselves represented in these arenas, you know, where it's 1,000 animals and one white kid as a character, that's a problem, you know, because that affects their self-esteem as well. So my challenge is for those allies, our allies who are not Black or brown, who are Muslim, to start writing those characters into their books and animations to show the representation, the breadth of the community, not just one, and not diminish it or render you invisible because my Islam does not look or sound like yours. That's another issue, that microaggression that pops up, but that's a whole nother conversation. So.
Anybody else?
Would anyone else like to jump in?
Just a quick point, and this is a self-criticism for myself that I'm just sharing. It's just to make sure that we just don't do a copy paste when it comes to the mental emotional health of Muslims. Right? Make sure we don't do copy and paste. And again, I hate to belabor this point, but we really have to look at this issue of capitalism, because what we're trying to do, and this is self-criticism, because I've gone through this system. We don't want to create something where we're just trying to help people be more well-adjusted in an unjust system, right? And that's not what we want to do. And so I would just say to the youth and to others, be very mindful when you look at these things. Look at when you mindfulness and yoga and counseling, psychotherapy. Be very mindful that they're not just making you a more well-adjusted subject. So I'll just stop with that. But yeah, I would just say that that's a very important, that we don't just do copy paste.
Can I mention something to that? MashaAllah, Brother Nasir it's perfect. MashaAllah. So that's basically what I'm charged to do every day in my current position, is dealing with social emotional learning, dealing with restorative justice, restorative practices, and things like that. And for me, my approach when dealing with students, and it's in a non-Muslim environment, but the way I'm framing it for students is not that you become comfortable with your situation as it is, but you need to be in a mental framework, a mental state of being, for you to be able to progress and fight against what put you there to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. So the effects and the need for social emotional learning, how to regulate, how to cope, how to deal with, how to be resilient, is extremely important, but not for the sake of you just being complacent, but for the sake of you being able to empower yourself to now push back, fight forward, make a difference, grow and expand, and then contribute back to your community to uplift everybody else, right? So it's not like an either or kind of situation, but I do agree, like, it's not a copy and paste situation, because who's writing those curriculums at the moment, right? So we need to tweak that, number one. And number two, I think if we bring in the Islamic part to the original question, I think it'll help us balance that out. But again, even bringing in the Islamic part, it has to be us writing that curriculum for our kids in this place, in this time, right? Because a social emotional Muslim curriculum could look different in Kuwait versus here, right? So we also have to be mindful of that as well. But again, that takes capital to invest people to be able to write that stuff. So there's a lot of holistic moving parts that have to happen at the same time in order for us to be able to achieve those things, inshallah.
C.Islaah, would you like to jump in
Yeah,
on that?
I'm thinking and processing everything that has been said, and my own experience includes having done some turnaround post-traumatic work in a school, a rather large school, and I know that we had to write the book as we were implementing it. So I worked with counselors, like we worked together every day to come up with, to build on what was already out there, but to come up with specific protocols, teaching modules, things of that nature, to improve the social emotional learning of the students and staff and community, because all of it was intertwined, but it doesn't get documented well, and I guess that is because of the Capitol. But one of the things I was reading recently, and being old, I have a historical perspective on things, and looking back, this is going to take a certain amount of sacrifice too, because yes, there is a need for capital. We're not going to take that off the table. There's a need for reparations. That's a given. But when we've had situations like this in the past, where we've had to come together and create solutions, there has to be a measure of sacrifice. That's part of this, because what are we willing to give up? We want racial equity. We want our children to be healthy. We want to have strong institutions. And when people point out to me, well, back in the day, they did the Montgomery bus boycott, and that lasted 300 and some days. But those people then had a longer attention span to things of that nature, and they were groomed to attend to that for a long period of time. Right now, we're dealing with people who want instant gratification. We want it now. We don't want to wait. We don't want to go through the planning process, the research process. And I think that's always going to be the case. So you have to have a group of people who are willing to sacrifice. And that might mean you have to not have the pay that you would normally have as a curriculum writer, as a teacher, as a administrator in these spaces as we are creating them, because we are in the infancy stage. And then we will call upon, or simultaneously you call upon your business community, the entrepreneurs, the people who can focus on that, to find ways to fund this, because the work can't wait until we get the capital to do the work. We still have to do the work, and we have to change mindsets. So there's no such thing as a retired Black teacher or a retired Muslim teacher or a retired counselor. All of us right now could be called into battle and drafted to work for this purpose. Excuse me for getting.
No, that was really good. A good segue into the majority of Muslim youth are in public schools. We know this. And so that leads me to question the relevancy of the Muslim schools that we do have. How much work are they doing? Are they supporting our impoverished Black and brown Muslim children on the level that they need? And that's one question. But in the second part would be, we also know that the majority of Black and brown Muslim educators are not also in the Muslim schools. Why is that? And is there a solution for that? Is the private Muslim school an outdated sort of solution to what is happening, because they're not serving the masses, educators or youth or Muslim parents in this society? And how do we go about that? If anybody wants to jump in on.
Well, I can jump in, but I'm going to
jump in
right now to someone else, and then I'll come back, because
any idea?
I have thoughts.
Anybody have anything to say about that?
Well, I'm gonna start it off then. I'll prime the pump. I think I'm going to put it like this. Some of them are accomplishing what they were set up to do. They may not have been set up to address the masses, and we have to realize that. They may have been set up to meet the needs of a particular group, a particular community, and that's their effort. Okay, so I'm not as much concerned, like when the brother said he's not concerned about how somebody else is thinking about him. I'm more concerned about what we're willing to do, because they've done that. And if it meets the needs or doesn't meet the needs, then I always ask parents, because I have been in charge of Muslim schools and non-Muslim schools. And I ask parents, if you say that this isn't meeting the needs, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to change? There is a lack of parental participation on a lot of levels. We can't get in our feelings and let people lock us out if we are allowing our children to be there. If we put our children in these spaces, we have to be active participants. And that's from hiring to curriculum to whatever. We have to try to influence that, whether it's a Muslim school, whether it's a private school, it doesn't matter. If you're not a voice, if you're not being, a presence, then it's going to wind up having the same effect. And then the reality of money. A lot of the Muslim parents cannot afford the tuitions, which when you compare them to other private schools, isn't even as high, but we just can't afford it. So we need different models. We need to look at different approaches. I'm not knocking anyone's effort. I will critique it if it, in the areas that I think it needs to be refined. But I also have to turn that spotlight, that microscope back on us. I don't want to critique someone else's effort. I want us to find ways to create our own, to make them strong, because in the past, it was Muslims and non-Muslims who were trying to get into Muslim schools in the past. And so we need to try to think like that and go back to a model where we are not letting them lead the effort for us, but that we're creating for ourselves. And then perhaps, we can and simultaneously find the funding for it.
Can I chime in on that too? Like, I don't think it's an either or per se either. Like, I don't think we always, a lot of times we think in dichotomies and things, and it's not always like that. So it doesn't have to be like we either do public school or we either do Muslim school, or, I think there's still enough space for us to be able to do both and do both well. But just to kind of go to the point that Sister Kim mentioned about international students going to, a Black college to benefit from Black scholars, right? And then not want to associate with Black students in the MSA, right? Like, how does that even just rationally in your mind, how does that make any sense whatsoever? You were willing to travel from overseas to go to a university in America. You chose a Black school with Black, and then not associate with their other classmates who are Muslims just like you, but are Black. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So that mentality then is the mentality that's coming when that if they stay and settle and they create their Muslim school, that's the mentality that they're coming into when they're establishing that institution. It's more of a means of cultural preservation than the growth of Islam in this country, right? And I think for us, being that like that non-Muslim is my mother, that non-Muslim is my auntie or my cousin, right? The interest of establishing Islam in this place is very different, right? It's much more like the Sahaba, who themselves were converts. They were coming back and coming back to their fitrah, but everybody else around them, they were a minority, right? So this establishment, there was a passion behind it because that's their people, right? So I think if we don't have the ability to control to a certain extent the curriculum and the instruction and the administrators and the teachers and all those elements, so that is embedded, right, in what is being taught and how it's being taught to the students, then we might have to just go ahead and try to establish our own. Now, obviously there's the complications of that, talking about capital and all that kind of thing, but, I think the ideal utopian situation is that if we are able to pool our resources generally on the big we now, right? Not just the people of color, Muslim we, but the bigger we, and we have people of color in charge of all those different layers of the educational system, then the youth, the immigrant youth, or second, third generation youth themselves would also get to an expanded understanding of what Islam is supposed to be here, and hopefully in their heart learn to love their neighbor who's not Muslim, to give them Islam, right? So it becomes about Islam from everybody, not just from us, because that's my family, right? It needs to be all of us having this passion to push Islam. That's how it should be from all of us, not just us indigenous Muslims that happen to be here. But, you know, again, I'm talking real high level utopian type stuff, but I think on the smaller, more actionable level, we have to either push for that in the schools that already exist, and if they're not open and willing, then we need to start pooling ourselves and sacrificing, as the sister was mentioning, to try to come up with those solutions, you know, internally.
Can I make it just a quick 2-second point?
Go ahead. Yep.
So I would just say, yeah, it's as the brother says, not a dichotomy of either or. I would just say that we also put on the table homeschooling. That's the only thing I would say, right? That there's a number of options, and one might be homeschool.
For sure, I did that with my own kids, so 100%.
As do I. So,
As
which
do
is
I.
interesting because I work in the public school, but I also homeschool, and I know there's many educators who are doing that. Within, it's a growing trend within the Black and Brown community, the homeschooling. But you know, there's pros and cons with that as well. But moving on, anybody else have another comment on that? Because I'm going to ask another question. All right, inshallah. Our Muslim youth, and let's just break down, because we talked about in the flyer about dealing with the death of Mr. George Floyd and the impact that has had on the Black and Brown communities. We've been seeing the fallouts, the revolts, the protesting, the looting, all of that. Our youth, our Muslim youth, our non-Muslim youth, they are seeing these images, they are taking it in, they are experiencing trauma, they are experiencing a lot of emotional turmoil. We're seeing in some of the fallout revolts, you know, youth on TV being pulled out of cars, being tased, people, you know, looting. How do we guide and model for our students, especially our Muslim youth, from K-12 all the way up to grad school? How do we guide and model for them the Islamic educational necessities that they need at this time? What should be in their toolbox right now in dealing with the aftermath of this George Floyd death and that injustice? Because so many want to go out. So many of our youth, they're just like any other youth. They're ready to go out. They're ready to do something. As C.Islaah was saying, that instant gratification. This is the I want it now, Instagram generation, Snapchat. You see me, I'm doing something. What should be in their toolbox? What should we be telling them and preparing them for?
I'm not a scholar, but I think back to this verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not change the condition of a people until they can change what is within themselves. So I'm not into the whole marching piece, and I would tell folk don't go out there. As we mentioned earlier about building up, like how are you living your life? And now that's not going to have an effect on white supremacy or police brutality, but in terms of how are we morally living our lives, how we are conducting ourselves, how are we treating each other, how are we treating our children, our family, spouses, etc. I think we need to look at our energies in controlling what we can actually control per se, which we know we don't have any ultimate control, but in terms of your actions every day, what are you doing? What steps are you taking? And I think when you look at, are you living your life in this moral way? Are you living your life according to the Sunnah? Are you doing these things that every day you can make a positive contribution to yourself and your family, your community? I think that's where we start. and that's what we focus on. And because I've been even on Twitter posting like, y'all better not get out there all that stuff, because what's the point? Like, are you going to get a win from it? Because if you're not going to get a win from it, there's no need for you to be out there. And I think we should focus our energies on something that would be more positive, more productive in our struggle.
Dr. Kimberly, can you respond to that on a
Yeah.
collegiate level?
I am all for the protesting. And but for me, I think what's important is that our students understand technology and how the posting, the sharing of the videos, that is just one form of activism. So now you got to have part two, because I think we get comfortable in sharing the change of color petition online. We get comfortable tweeting it, sharing it on Instagram. So they need to really understand that's just a small part of changing the process. And then going back to I can't remember who mentioned it, but understanding the systems that are affecting us. Like, okay, what is imperialism? What is colonialism? And if this is the result, you need to understand what it is and how it's moving in your life, so you can begin to unpack it. How we do that, I don't know, but I just know that the students I come in contact with are so plugged into their phones that I think it's a distraction. So if that's where they're going to be, we need to teach them how to use it and how it operates. Technology is not neutral. A lot of what we see in the material world is being replicated in the digital world. So there's a new way to enact systems of oppression where people are being tracked. And that's nothing new for the Black community. We've been tracked since we got here. But, these systems that these programmers are writing that are racist, we have to teach them how to attack that as well. So I think activism is two parts, and for this generation particularly, they got to know that it's not enough to do it on the computer. And so if they're out there protesting, then how do you do it safely? And then what other steps do you need to do in order to change it? And that goes back to Sister Islah's comment about the organizing and being focused. I feel like we lack that. We get out there and we protest, but there really isn't an organization behind you that's also somebody in the office saying, okay, they're protesting now, step one, that's done. Step two, step three, what do we need to do next? So that's my biggest thing. Like, what are we going to do after the protest? Because that's going to eventually end. We got to have something in place.
I wanted to mention that you said, what do they need to have or know and have in their toolbox? And I think the first thing, and what I'm saying is something I think we all believe, is that they have to believe that it is Allah who is in control, first and foremost, and not Trump, not Congress, not, that they are subject to his decree and commands just like everyone else. Because if you are thinking the opposite, then you give these people ultimate control over you and your mind and your destiny. So that's one. The second thing is that when I teach students who are old enough to understand some abstract things, then I usually will try to do something on propaganda, getting them to understand how people, and I always tell them, you have to even listen to what I'm saying. I have an agenda. Everybody has one. So you have to learn how to listen critically to what you hear, and to view critically, to experience critically, and not just swallow everything wholesale. I think they have to have in their toolbox an idea about muhasabah, their reflection on themselves, because you can take action. And I think that certain things can happen all at the same time. You can have the protest. Some people need that visceral release. They need that gut reaction. I want to go out. I want to shout. I want to say that I'm mad. I'm angry. Yes. And then you also have to teach people how to cope and process that. And alongside of that, you always have to have a group of people who will strategize. What are we doing? And like you said, after the march, this is not going to always be there. I didn't want to be a pessimist, but when everybody started putting up the picture of the Black Lives Matters street graphic that they wrote in front of the White House, I started to put, but is it indelible ink or is it water paint? So it's easy for us to feel like, and I'm not diminishing anyone's effort. They did that. It will energize some and inspire some, give hope to some. But for our Muslim youth, we need to find hope in the promise of Allah, that if we do what we need to do, if we're steadfast and sincere, if we study, if we are doing the things that Allah loves, that inshallah He will bless us. That He has already written our destiny, and that we don't have to rely on asking for it, because like the brother said, I'm not for that either. You can't tell me my life matters. I'm okay with people saying that, but I don't use the term, because you can't tell me that. You can't tell me my child, my sons, my Black sons, that their lives matter. They already matter because Allah says they matter.
Yeah,
Allah says they matter. Now you need to change your thinking about it. But that's not my struggle. Mine is taking the resources we have, making sure we keep Allah first and foremost in our minds, but organizing and coming up with some concrete ideas for how we can move this forward.
Brother Nasir, I see your hand. Go ahead, sir.
So I'll say this. I think it's critical, again, when we go back to the narrative that we give our children, and also the narrative that we hold, again, as someone who works in the field of counseling, one of the first things I always do with clients is to talk about the narrative, getting in control of the self-talk, that internal dialogue we're having. And so what is critical about that is, and this is the toolkit that they take out with them, is political education. Again, I came to Islam through Malcolm. What Malcolm, and I think this is for most people, the thing that gravitated them to Malcolm was his ability to articulate their political, social, and economic plight in a manner that related to them. That's political education. So then when you have political education and you go out to the street, or if you stay in the house, you have a what to what end, you have a goal that you're going towards, that you're working towards, right? So as we all know, those of us in this field of counseling and coaching, that, you know, you want to have a goal, and then you want to check if your actions, what you think, feel, say, and do, is in line with your goals, your values, and your purpose. And that could be spiritually, religiously, or whatever it may be. But if you don't have the political education, then again, where are you moving towards? You're just out there releasing, and that's okay, but that's not a long-term, that doesn't work towards your long-term goal. And the last point that I would make is this: the critical analysis in the beginning about our situation, this issue of colonialism, is critical, because that then lets us know, and this is the self-esteem part, that we're just not some Africans isolated in America. We are Africans that are descendants of a diaspora that was forced out of Africa. We are not the minority. We are the majority. But when we take their education, we think we are the minority. No, we are the majority, and we are collected to a majority that is the working and oppressed class in the world. It's international. That's the type of toolkit and understanding that I would like people to take out with them when they hit the streets, because the revolution and the rebellion that's happening in the streets of America, you see it in Paris, you see it in South Africa, you see it throughout the world. We're connected through this thing of colonialism. And when we give our youth and the adults that understanding, then they know what they're up against. You're up against state violence. So it makes sense that the police, they take the police off the streets, then they bring in the National Guard, then they bring in the military. What does it sound like? As Muslims, we think back to what happened in Egypt. Remember, the police were on the street. Then the rebellion happened. They said they don't want the police. They only trust the military. The military came in. These are all apparatuses of the state. And the state keeps the colonial power in place. So then they can exploit us, and our communities don't have the money to have our own schools, to have our own banks, to have our own institutions, to have our own factories, to make our own cars, right? So political education is critical. And that can start at a very young age. And it can also start, later on in life.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's just critical that, you know, the Muslim parents in our communities, that they are, regardless if they're Black or brown or, you know, immigrant, Arab, Pakistan, Asian, that they're having these conversations early on and regularly with their children, and not thinking that, you know, the American dream, you know, that's going to keep them safe, right? So we need to be having that conversation, especially with the Black and brown Muslim youth and non-Muslim youth, but also to our immigrant Muslim family. They need to be having these conversations as well. It has to start happening regularly. Yes, sir.
Just a very quick, I promise, let me just very quick. And I think that's, if you're going to have that discussion, because some of our people, they're not interested in having that conversation with your brothers and sisters, and that's okay. But for those of us that are, I think that's another critical point to realize. Look, ask, why did your mother and father or your grandparents or great-grandparents immigrate to America? That's because colonialism made your country so tight, the opportunity was so scarce, they wanted to get out. Right? So we are connected around this issue of colonialism, of imperialism. And if we don't remove that, we're going to be in the same situation. We're going to continue to see what it's like to be colonial subjects in America. That looks the same thing in Muslim nations as well as non-Muslim nations. So internationalize the struggle is what I would say to the youth that I have talked to and that I would continue to say. Have political education. But I also agree with the brother. Not everybody, look, from the, apologies, from the emotional well-being. If you know you don't have that anger management and that sense of control and understanding of your emotions and how to process them, stay your butt home. Because you're Black. They're going to lock you up and put you under the jail. So if you don't have that emotional control and well-being, find another way to help the struggle. Get involved with an organization, allocate a certain amount of money during the month or the weekly to certain organizations that are in line with what you think are constructive steps. But if you ain't got that emotional control and you know you go off like this, then yeah, you need to stay home.
Well said. Ustadh Sajid?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to come off of mute. All right, so this is going to be the last question, and then after whoever wants to answer this one, then we'll have your closing remarks. I'll kind of the last couple of questions are actually related. So 1 second here. Okay.
Action steps?
Well, the training that Muslim parents share with their children in regards to racism, you know, helping children identify racism and some of the strengths that we need as Black and brown Muslims to help young people do that. And then some of the action steps to take in our communities and schools. You don't have to answer all of those, whatever part you want to attack, but those are pretty much the last 3 questions that we had, and then we'll have your closing remarks.
Dr. Will, you want to start off?
I think the first thing is we need to be grounded spiritually. You know, as Sister Islaah spoke about, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. We know that we were created, you know, different tribes so that we may learn from one another, not despise one another. We know about the last sermon of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what he has said. So we need to be spiritually grounded in understanding that we were made for a purpose and who we are. And then from there, I think with that knowledge of self as who we are as Black people as well, and understand that history and build upon that and not allow ourselves to be defined by what other people think of who we are, but in essence, using Islam as a way to define ourselves and to chart our own paths.
Thank you. Dr. Kimberly?
You know, when I think about little Muslim boys and girls, and sometimes parents need to apologize to their children for putting them in situations that force them to, that did not affirm them. And so I'm talking about like extreme situations where people have grown up in Islam and their parents were trying to figure it out. And as a result of that, they experience trauma in their childhood. And so they sometimes replicate that with their own children. So I think parents need to take a responsibility and really decide, okay, is this going to be an affirming situation for my child? If it's not, then I need to create an alternative, or see if there are other people who are willing to work with me to make something that I'm seeking for my children. And I'm talking about social settings and things, because you can't get everything from the masjid as much as we would like. There's a lot of racism there. And then telling your children, giving them the tools so that they understand, like, look, you're Muslim and your Islam is valid and how we practice is valid. And if somebody tells you otherwise, you need to give your children a space to have those conversations with you rather than brushing it under the rug. Because if it happens and they want to talk about it, you shouldn't say, well, you know, that's just how they are. No, talk about it so they can have that space in at home where they feel that they're being heard. So that's my take on it.
C.Islaah?
I want to mention the importance of reading. I think we as a community have gotten away from that. We do a lot of listening. We see little sound bites and we see video clips, but to actually pick up books and read and study is becoming a lost art. And I think that I would like to see families start to read and dissect things together, not just tell your child, well, you know, you have to read this book. I want to mention 3 books, 3 authors. One is The Failure of Public Education in the Black Community. And that is by Dr., let me get the glasses again. It's Dr. Anyam Palmer, and I refer to this. The works of Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. I studied this. I used this a lot when I was training. In fact, this was one of the required, his books were required in some of my graduate courses. I would have the students look at these. And then it's another one that has come out fairly recently called We Are an African People. That is by Russell Rickford. And it's dealing with the establishment of independent schools. Read and think, and the rest becomes clear. Each person will have a different moral imperative, depending on your situation, your capacity, but do what you're able to do to help affect change.
Brother Jose?
Inshallah, I think on 2 ends. Number one, with families, very much like what Sister Islaah was mentioning, you know, I think there's 3 things that we have to strive to do all the time, every day with our families. Is number one, pray together. So if you can't make it to the masjid, make sure you pray together in congregation in the house. Eat together, right? So don't, you know, serve dinner and one person's on playing video games over here, the other person's over there. You know, eat together so you can have just regular conversations, and then read together, as she mentioned. So I think being able to dissect and grow some type of bond, because right now everything being virtual, everything being in snippets I think is damaging even our families internally. So that's number one. Number two, I think for the tools to give to our children, just reflecting on 2 concepts from Dr. Jackson, Dr. Sherman Jackson. Number one is getting them to understand the vertical gaze, not just the horizontal. Because I know a lot of times, you know, we've been taught to always think plan, and all those things obviously are very important. But we have to always make sure that we remember the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that He is truly in control. He is the one that we need to appeal to. So while we're doing the planning and building and all those things on this horizontal level, we got to remember that vertical piece and make sure we have that connection to Allah, because in the end, He is the one that controls everything. And the second piece that he mentioned too is this idea of it's slipping my mind. Let me see if I can find it in my notes real quick. to know, and this is particularly for the Black community, to know and understand that Islam in the Black American community is a miracle. Like the number of enslaved people that came to America is much less than what came to Latin America. But you didn't find Islam grow anywhere else in the Americas except here in the United States. So there's something unique about the Black American experience that Allah chose to gift them with Islam. And that's an honor that Allah has bestowed upon the Black American community. And to give that sense of honor to our youth is empowering in and of itself. And then to say, now that you've been given that miracle and that honor of being Muslim, indigenously Muslim, it wasn't because of some outside dawah program. Like, it just happened, and it didn't happen anywhere else in the Americas. That is special. You are special. Therefore, you have responsibility. Now let's get busy, right? But I think, when it comes to that low self-esteem piece, kind of flipping it and getting him to understand that knowledge of self, as everybody's been talking about, but really, that this is a gift from Allah. Like, this is a miracle. It's like straight up. It's a miracle that it happened here, and it didn't happen in Brazil. It didn't happen in Cuba. It didn't happen in these other places, right? That's something special, and they should feel proud of that. And then now they have a responsibility to try to do something with that, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Brother Omar. Brother Omar, you with us?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Assalamu alaikum to the panel. And I've been listening to Barakallah Fikum. Very good. It was a very good. Sometimes we waste our times doing useless stuff. So I'm very grateful for this. But no buts. But two things I wanted to that I was thinking of. I know that the great Imam Malik, he made a statement that the latter part of this ummah will not be corrected except what corrected its earlier path, its earlier part. And why I'm saying that is because I think that a lot of times a lot of our problems is that we've gone away in terms of whether we're in our communities, we've gone away from, like I think someone was mentioning about instant gratification. We've gone away from the things that was practiced to try to correct the problems that we're facing. Now, I don't know if that's because it could be some of the youth, or even myself, we might not know, or that we're impatient. We want instant gratification, but I think that is something that we need to to keep in mind. The other thing I wanted to, is really more of a question. How I heard earlier, we were talking about you were talking about the necessity, the need for reparations. How can we get people to understand that, I hear a lot of times, people, we need a Black agenda, we need a Black agenda, we need a Black agenda. And I think that, and I think that's true. Well, of course we need a Black agenda, but I think sometimes we're putting the cart before the horse. In that, like I think there's something that y'all mentioned about the issues about, we don't have capital. Whatever agenda that we put together, it will just fall by the waysides because we don't have that capital. So how can we? And I guess this is the question someone can answer this. How can we just re-educate ourselves that say, okay, we have to put everything is in its proper place, so that we're not doing something to a pipe dream perspective. So that's the basic. Thank you for your time.
Just like Brother Jose was saying, I think there's work to do. I mean, just look, how many Muslim educators do we have? Like, Black and brown Muslim educators just in the United States, not looking at Canada, not looking at South America. How many do we have in this country? Are we coming together to do the work? Are we networking? Are we building? There are things that we can do on a micro level. Of course, there's a macro level to this, but there's work that we can be doing and network that we can be doing right now, and building systems of support for Muslim youth and non-Muslim oppressed youth throughout this country that we just are not doing. We're not collaborating. I mean, we are educators.
Yeah.
You know, we are natural thinkers and problem solvers. That's what we teach. We are, you know, our responsibility is to teach our children how to think and solve problems. Yet we are not coming together to do that amongst ourselves as adults. You know, just looking at the systems, the private school system, the public school sector, so many problems that we know glaringly. We had another panel discussion about, you know, just the problems in academia. We can go on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, but where's the solutions? Because we are the problem solvers, you know, and then we say, well, the youth, you know, they're the future. But we have to lay that path down. We have to lighten that path for them so that their steps are easier to take. We got to take some of these big leaps so that they can come and walk behind us. So there's things that we have to do, especially as that we are by Allah, right? We have been given some responsibilities in this thing. We have been honored with Islam. We have been honored beyond that with, even now we have these education, we have these degrees and certificates, and you know, we sit in these, you know, PDs and we talk to these different people, but what are we doing with it? Where's the connection? And where's the application for the youth? So yeah, they're going out there and people say, well, you know, that's not really doing anything, but they want to do something. So we got to teach them how to do something. And the same thing for like education and building systems and creating something better, whatever that better is. I don't have it yet. I'm thinking, but I don't know what it is yet. But it's like we got to start somewhere. We got to start somewhere, and that's why I had, you know, all of you all come here and start thinking about this, because I think we are living, alhamdulillah, Allah has allowed us. Now we're breathing at a time where so many people in the world cannot breathe.
Right.
You understand? And we're still able to think, and we're still able to write, and we're still able to educate these children and young people in front of us. But are we giving them what they need? Are we modeling for them the steps that they need to take, the action that they need? And so that's really the higher level, right? The higher order. Think of now application that we need to do ourselves. And I think they're looking back on us. They're looking back on us for the support, but they're just ready to go. You know, these kids are out there and they're ready to go. So we have to give them that application. You ready? You have the energy, you have the heart, you have the mind, but these are the steps, and we can support you and we can love you in that.
One quick point is that I think we have to think also in terms of educating the educators, because everybody is not on the same page. And when the pandemic started, I posed the question, do we as Muslim educators have a moral imperative to do something? What is our moral responsibility? And not everybody who was in that group felt that their Islam and the knowledge that Allah has blessed them with and the skill of teaching, all of that together still did not compel them to have a responsibility. And my point was that if we were doctors, we could be called into action. But as educators, we can sit on the sidelines. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we need to really think in terms of teacher training, educator training, because if you hire people or get people, you said we can teach them, but if their thinking is the thinking that needs to be purified, that's not going to help either.
Very good.
Want to add that.
Ustadh Sajid, you want to jump in, please?
Okay, inshallah. Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words near our closing, and you know, one of the part of the reason, you know, why we had this panel, of course, some of the recent events that have taken place, you know, here in the country against Black people once again. That's part of what spearheaded this, and so. And well, before I go into that, just, you know, my background is I forgot to briefly introduce myself, but I'm just going to basically add to some of the Islamic perspectives that some of you have already included in your your answers or responses to the panel questions, because that's more or less my area of that I studied the most. Islam. I've studied. I have a bachelor's degree as well, but I've also studied a little bit in Saudi Arabia and some in Kuwait and so forth. So I try to kind of new to this whole academic thing. So I'm trying to learn from everyone. And so in regards to racism in general, it's like, for example, if we look at shirk is the worst sin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that it's the worst sin in the world, the worst sin that one can commit. Yet he decreed that it takes place. He decreed that it is going to happen. And likewise, racism is one of those major sins that will inevitably take place until the day of judgment. And the ayat that talk about that in the Quran, in the series of the ayat, it shows it. You can from it. I'll read them. It will show you that this is something that will not go away. In Surah Al-A'raf, which is the 7th chapter of the Quran, from verse 11 to 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أن نستعيذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد خلقناكم ثم صورناكم ثم قلنا للملائكة اسجدوا لآدم فسجدوا إلا إبليس لم يكن من الساجدين قال ما منعك ألا تسجد إذ أمرتك قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين قال فاهبط منها فما يكون لك أن تتكبر فيها فاخرج إنك من الصاغرين قال أنظرني إلى يوم يبعثون قال إنك من المنظرين قال فبما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم ثم لآتينهم من بين أيديهم ومن خلفهم وعن أيمانهم وعن شمائلهم ولا تجد أكثرهم شاكرين قال اخرج منها مذءوما مدحورا لمن تبعك منهم لأملأن جهنم منكم أجمعين. Now just read the translation. I think this is Sahih International, I'm not sure. Starting at verse 11, says, translation, and we have certainly created you, O mankind, and given you human form. Then we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam. So they prostrated except for Iblis. He was not of those who prostrated. Allah said, what prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you? Satan said, I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. Allah said, descend from paradise, for it is not for you to be arrogant therein. So get out. Indeed, you are of the debased. Satan said, reprieve me until the day they are resurrected. Allah said, indeed, you are of those reprieved. Satan said, because you have put me in error, I will surely sit and wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come to them from before them and from behind them, and on their right and on their left, and you will not find most of them grateful to you. Allah said, get out of paradise, reproached and expelled. Whoever follows you among them, I will surely fill hell with you altogether. So, some of the, the scholars or people of knowledge have, commented on this verse saying that this is the origin of, for an example, racism and discrimination. The point is that it began in Jannah. This dialogue took place in Jannah. So, and from the verses, as you see, Shaitan asks for, respite until the day of judgment to continue this. So, of course, this racism, this discrimination, all this stuff is from Shaitan, and he will continue to work on the people to get them to practice this until the day of judgment, as Allah, here says in the Quran. And so, today, unfortunately, I mean, I don't have time to go into some of the points that what they call like the action steps and whatnot. But one thing that is clear is that we all know that this type of behavior, the racism, the discrimination, segregation, all this type of stuff, we know that it is forbidden in Islam. So the issue is not whether or not it's forbidden, or, we have plenty of ayat and plenty of hadith that clearly show that it's prohibition. The thing now is, how do we deal with it? And Islam has the solution to that. And because if we believe that Islam is a complete and total way of life, we have to believe that all of the answers are within the deen, whether we know them or not. Just because we don't know what the Islamic answer is does not mean that it's not contained in the deen. It just means you don't know what it is. But we know that the deen is perfect, not the individual. Allah said that he perfected Islam, not human beings. So we are imperfect, and we adopt Islam to, work on perfection, though it's something, we will never attain, but it's something that we work on until we die. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, worship Allah until certainty comes to you, which has been explained as death. So, and so part of the action plan, part of the solution has to include Islam. And many of you mentioned that. I think that as Sister Islaah meant about the reading is very important. I alhamdulillah had the privilege to attend a Muslim school growing up. Sister Islaah was actually one of my teachers, advisors, mentors, and so forth from my community. But I can honestly say that I didn't pay attention very much in school when it came to history. So I really don't remember a detailed study about my history as a Black person, or Islamic history for that matter. I did receive an excellent Islamic education, in my opinion, from the school and the masjid, as well as my Muslim parents, but I didn't get that information. I think now with the things that are going on, and especially for young people, education about our history and Islamic history is very important, because without the deen, there is no success, period. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what else you have. If Islam is excluded, then there will be no success. And if you think that you've attained success in this life without Islam, it is a mirage. It is, because Allah says in the Quran that, paraphrase, it's like a setup for the people where they think that they do all of this good, and then on the day of judgment, they found out that it was a waste. It was a waste. It wasn't sincere. And so again, young people being involved in activism and social justice and all this stuff is great. It's good. But one of the things that we have to remember is that I've always felt that Islam needs to be infused in whatever we do. Whatever we do, Islam has to be infused, because we cannot guide the people without Islam. We will never attain true justice without Islam being a part, of the conversation and the solution, and the action plan. And so, alhamdulillah, again, there was a lot more that I had that I wanted to add, but because of time, I can't really go into a lot of that. But alhamdulillah, that's what I wanted to say. And if anybody has any comments or questions about that, you can feel free before we close out.
Shukran. I think right now I want everyone to just give your closing statement, which is to include an action step, a call to action for our Muslim communities. We didn't really address but another time, inshallah, what our response to the non-Black, brown Muslim leadership to Black and brown Muslim youth. I think that's a whole other conversation with Muslim youth in our community, dealing with Muslim leaders in our communities who don't have an understanding of our history, who don't have an understanding of our communities, but are in position of power dealing with Black and brown Muslim youth. That's another conversation right now. Just one action step if you want to give to the Muslim community, non-Muslim community, because we deal with all of the children, all of the youth who are struggling with understanding what they should do next, how they should guide that energy and that upset that they have inside of them. What is one action step that they can do, inshallah? So I'll start with you, Dr. Kimberly. An action step.
Yes, okay. So I think it's of great importance that we find a way to unify and support the community. And one way we can do that is to reach out to each other's organizations and support. So if we know that somebody else has, a food drive or, whatever that organization, that Muslim organization is doing or non-Muslim organization is doing, go ahead and support it. If it aligns with what Allah is calling us to do, and it's going to push the agenda forward, go ahead and support instead of saying, well, that's not a Muslim or they're non-Muslim, so I'm going to leave it alone. I think we have to start working together in meaningful ways, and we need to create organizations. So that's the action. My action step is to start creating organizations for Muslim students and children to get involved in their community outside of the masjid. We can go out and serve and work, and that's what we need to do.
Brother Nasir, I see your hand.
Okay, so action step, and if I can just one last thing to the previous question that was asked regarding reparations. I think it's very important, again, that we internationalize our struggle, connect our youth with the international struggle. Our brother that was just with us from Puerto Rico, look, birth control pills. How do we get that? The exploitation of poor Puerto Rican women, testing out things that were not, what is the word I'm thinking of, approved to be used in the state. So they went down to Puerto Rico to test out birth control. We know gynecology started with testing on African slaves. We see enslaved Africans. We know that these things happen throughout the continent. So we have to internationalize the struggle. And when you internationalize the struggle, look, the French colonies are still paying back the debt to France. So when we look throughout all of the places there was colonization, there is just cause for people to advocate for reparations. When we unify and connect, then we have a stronger case or a stronger power to enforce what is due us. So that would be the answer to the last thing. And if I could give one thing to an action step would be to purchase some books. Purchase this book, Vanguard. I'll have it up on my social media on Instagram, Vanguard. It'll give you political education. For those in the counseling field, purchase this text, McMindfulness. It talks about how mindfulness and other therapeutic modalities are being used to just silence us, to get us to, as Malcolm said, suffer peacefully, right? So that's what I would say. From the nation, please get this text. Understanding the assault on Black men, Black manhood, and Black masculinity. And the very last thing is medical apartheid. Please get these texts. And I'm sorry, I lied. That wasn't the last one. Get this, post-traumatic slave syndrome. There is a workbook. There is a workbook that comes with it. So please purchase books. And I made 2 lies. My other thing, so that was one action. The second actionable would be, if you don't have children now and you plan on having children in the future, please have a sincere talk with your spouse or future partner about what you're going to do in terms of screen time with devices as well as with the TV. I haven't had a TV for over 20 years. It was the best decision I made. Please. That would be the 2 things I say.
Alhamdulillah. Thank
Apologies
you
for going over.
Nope. Alhamdulillah, Sister Islah.
I'm thinking about how when you ask someone if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? And one of the answers that people like to give is, I would ask for more wishes. So the action step is for people to really incorporate their beliefs into their actions. so that we are actually making istikhara, making dua, praying before taking steps, praying for increasing knowledge, praying for guidance. Because if we, I'm wondering about our youth who are out right now, because like you said, they're out there. They're not thinking about going out there. It's some of them who are leading the protests, leading the charge. So I don't have a problem with that. I just would want to caution them and remind them to make sure that they take those steps of praying, asking Allah for guidance, understanding that they don't know and are still learning. They don't know everything. They're still learning, and to ask Allah to purify their intentions. Because right now we see, I was explaining what carpetbaggers means. People who are trying to, the term was used after slavery was abolished, and the people who came and preyed upon the community. And right now you have a lot of opportunists who are out there trying to, take advantage of the vulnerability of our youth, the enthusiasm to do. And so the only protection, because as a mother, as a grandmother, the only protection we really have is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect and guide us, and to understand that we have to couple those prayers with action. When you pray, then move your feet. So that would be the step: to pray, then move your feet.
Dr. Will, we'll be closing out with you.
All right. I'll tell people, action step is to check yourself. What are you doing with your life? How are you living your actions? Are you praying? That's a reminder to myself first. Are you reading Quran? Are you studying Hadith? Are you giving charity? Are you living your life in a way that you are supposed to live your life? Are you being a good person? Because you cannot, for me, tell other people what to do, and you really can't control what other people do, but you got to check yourself. That's the only thing you can always, I hate saying control, because as we know, we control nothing in this earth, but in terms of our actions, the only thing you can do is what you are able to do. And if you are checking yourself and making sure that you are doing what you are supposed to be doing, I think that's the first action steps we all need to be taking.
Mine are twofold. I would say, our youth, our parents, is that we got to purify our intentions. Actions are judged by intentions, and every man or woman have what they're intended, inshallah. Purify your intentions and organize in our communities, right? If we come to the table with good intentions, with good heart, with good minds, that we want to make change, then inshallah, Allah will put the barakah into our actions so that we can affect change, right? So we have the good intentions. Like this is not some, as my students say, none of this is clout chasing, not to just get on Snapchat, Instagram, to be out there running around and looting and doing all of this stuff. But if we want change, then make that our intention. Come together, organize, and be proper with it. Be proper with it. Make sure that if you need to talk to the imam, or you need to talk to the teacher, or you need to talk to whoever, that you do that respectfully, and you share your opinions respectfully, and you come to them with good intention and with the objective to work together and to make some change, inshallah. And I'm thankful for all of you sharing your time and your afternoons with us. I hope that inshallah we can do this more often, because it's needed. Yes, Brother Nasir.
I just, to add on to everything that was just said, I just wanted to share one quote by Asada Shakur. She says, "Dreams and reality are opposites. Action synthesizes them." And I just, once I heard that just, for me, just was a paradigm shift. Again, it's dreams and reality are opposites. Action synthesizes them, by Asada Shakur. That was...
And that's a perfect way to close this, inshallah, because I don't want to keep you all longer. But I will definitely be following up with each of you, inshallah, and checking out your schedules, because more needs to be done, more networking, more collaborations, because this nation, this world, like you were saying, they're protesting in France, they're protesting in South Africa, they're protesting in Canada. we have to come together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this opportunity to make that paradigm shift, and we have to lead, inshallah, and Allah has put us in a position to do that. I thank you again for your time, and I hope, inshallah, Allah will bring us back together to make some actions and not just stay on this micro level of talking. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On the next time, on the flip side, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum. Take care, everyone.
Wa alaikum